All right. So I hope that you had the opportunity to watch this video and pay attention, okay, to all the different parts. Did you see how the ADP, the adenosine diphosphate, was transformed, was synthesized into ATP, the adenosine triphosphate? And I'm going to focus on that part of the process. So the last part of the electron transport chain, the KREBS cycle, shows an amazing protein called ATP synthase. ATP synthase is a protein that is embedded in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. Here we have a representation of this protein. See all the different subunits and the shape of this protein. And basically what happens is that throughout the process here of the KREBS cycle, the electron transport chain, if you watch carefully in the video, you will see that a hydrogen ions, which are basically hydrogen protons that are positively charged, are sent from the matrix of the mitochondria through the membrane into the intermembrane space. This accumulation of these hydrogen ions makes the intermembrane space of the mitochondrion to be basically electrically charged, okay, electrochemically charged. It's kind of like putting water in a dam. You are basically here, when you create a dam and a reservoir of water, you are storing the potential energy of that water. Here in the electron transport chain, as these hydrogen ions are stored in the intermembrane space, they create an electrochemical potential energy. And then these protons, because they have that much energy on one side, they go through this protein, through the ATP synthase protein, and they go through and they act really like a turbine of a generator in a hydroelectric plant. So in a hydroelectric plant, the water that is in the reservoir with potential energy is released. As it moves through, it transforms the potential energy into kinetic energy. The kinetic energy moves around the turbine and transforms in the generator. It induces an electrical current and transforms the kinetic energy of the turbine into electricity. That is really how it works. Okay? So you see how the energy is being transformed from one state to the other in the cell, in the mitochondria of the cell. The electrochemical energy here of the hydrogen ions is being released through this molecule of ATP synthase, and it literally acts like a turbine, and it joins ADP plus 1-phosphate into ATP, and that is how the ATP is synthesized. Okay, so we have, I want you to follow this link and watch this animation. This animation shows how the ADP comes in, the phosphate molecule also joins into this protein, and then they are basically pushed together, the ADP and the phosphate group, and they join and form ATP. Okay, so, and it's all driven by the current of hydrogen ions going through this protein. It's really like literally like a turbine. I don't know how else to describe it. But it's an amazing process. So let's see the formula of how this reaction happens. So we have ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and here we have the representation of the molecule. And see that di means two phosphates. So we have one phosphate here, the orange is the phosphate, one phosphate here, another phosphate there, okay? And when the adenosine diphosphate is attracted there to the ATP synthase protein, and a phosphate group is also added to it, it reacts through that protein that is being driven like a turbine, and it joins the phosphate group at the end of this other phosphate group, and there we have adenosine triphosphate. Okay, so tri means three, and you have 1, 2, 3 phosphates there, and these hydrogens, okay, are released with one of the oxygens and form a molecule of water. Okay, so that this new bond now between the diphosphate and the new phosphate, making the triphosphate, this is a high energy bond, okay, and it's not very stable. It is actually something that the molecule is going to kind of want to give up, and as it breaks this bond, is going to release energy to do something else, okay? So now the adenosine triphosphate, the ATP, is synthesized in the matrix of the mitochondria, and then it is released from the mitochondria into the cell. Now in the cell uses the ATP energy into exactly the reverse reaction. In the reverse reaction, we start with adenosine triphosphate, we add the molecule of water, and then it reacts and it liberates that phosphate, it breaks it down, and then you have adenosine diphosphate again. In the process, when the bond is broken here, energy is released. And that energy is used by other proteins, other parts of the cell, to drive another action. So for example, if you want to flex your arm or run, okay, remember that protein that we call, that we mentioned before, actin, okay? That is one of the proteins in the muscle cells. Well, in order for actin protein to change shape and contract or extend, it needs some energy. And so it uses one of these ATP molecules, breaks down the bond, okay, and the energy that is being released there at the actin protein makes the contraction possible, okay? So that is how our runner runs, okay? This reaction, the reaction of creating, of synthesizing, not creating, creating has the meaning of creating out of nothing. Nothing is done out of nothing in the body, okay? Of synthesizes ATP, and then the reaction of breaking down ATP into ADP happens all the time, millions of times a day, okay? And that is how our body uses energy, all right? So the origin, okay, of this energy is basically the food that we eat, the solids that we eat that are turned into glucose, the air that we breathe, the oxygen that we breathe, and that results into being transformed and released into carbon dioxide, that is also a gas, and water, that is a liquid, and heat or energy. The energy is captured into the ATP molecule, and then it is released by other cellular processes, and then the process goes back and forth again all the time, all right? I read in one website that our body has about 28 grams of ATP. Okay, 28 grams is less than an ounce. All right, so it's very, very small amounts of ATP. But the amount of ATP that is processed in this reaction and counter reaction in our whole body in one day is about the weight of our bodies. Okay, so this 1 ounce of ATP is processed and reprocessed constantly millions of times a day. Okay, and in that process we are basically breaking down glucose, breathing in oxygen. Oh, I keep having trouble going to the last slide. Let's go to the last slide there. Sorry. So breaking down molecules of glucose with oxygen, releasing carbon dioxide and water. All right. And all living organisms do this. Plants do this, animals, fungi, bacteria, all these cells do this process of cellular respiration. Okay, so an amazing process, and we will learn more about other ways, other forms of creating energy that the body has and cells have to synthesize energy that may not involve glucose in the next lesson. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed this very much. Thanks.